Hello, everybody. Very prompt at 10 a.m., so we're still likely to have quite a few people coming on the line at the moment. So we will give it a few minutes to give everybody a chance to join us. Firstly, thank you for taking the time out to listen to this. We've got a good share of the people hopefully joining us. I'll go through the agenda of today, what we're going to be covering off, and we're going to start with introducing Bytes as a company and what we do. So at least the people who do join us will probably join for the part they're super interested in, which is the Zedscaler SSL piece. Now, everyone's in a listen-only mode at the moment, but there is a questions panel, so you're very welcome to raise any questions if you're having any issues hearing me, etc. Through that mechanism, please, and we will work through what we can. In terms of the agenda, we'll go through some housekeeping just so everyone is on the same page about how this webinar is going to work out. Talk a little bit about Bytes, security partnerships, who we are, where we come from, and how we're relevant to this topic and potential other topics for you, hopefully. I'll be introducing Will Matthews, who is the security engineer at Zedscaler, at the end of my section. As you'll be pleased to know, Will, as a security engineer, a lot more technical than myself, will be doing the lion's share of this and covering off the interesting pieces for you. As a business, we're going to talk about where Bytes security partnerships are seeing the requirement for SSL, what's changed, why it's come about, and how the market's approaching it, what different routes there are to attack the problem, and then swiftly going into allowing Zedscaler to actually go into detail about what they can offer, what they see in this space, and giving you a different approach to help out. Now, in terms of housekeeping, I've mentioned you guys are on mute, so please do use that questions panel if you do need any help. In terms of the questions, if you can post anything that you feel is relevant or you need help with throughout the webinar, we'll try to address them at the end of the session and make sure we cover off as many as possible. In terms of those questions, if we could please keep them to technical or strategic discussions, just to make sure all of them are as relevant for the whole audience as possible. If anybody wants to go into more detailed strategic or technical questions on a later session, or get into the commercial conversations, we're very happy to do so, but we can do that as a follow-up. We are recording this session, so if anyone feels that other members of their company would benefit from this also, then please do request it. We'll ideally give you a link to make sure that you have access to this later, and there will be a feedback survey at the end. So first and foremost, who are we? So Bytes Security Partnerships, we're a value-adding reseller in purely network security space. We're part of the Bytes Technology Group, which means that our parents' parents are a $2 billion organization. So we're backed well, but we're still a 45-person company based in the UK, a large proportion of that being our technical staff. So all we do is security. That covers firewalls, web filtering, email, IDS, log retention, through to ADCs and two-factor authentication. So pretty much anything you'd associate with security. Our niche in the market is we only hire direct to engineer level staff. So our technical guys are all 5 or 6 years experience plus, consultancy level engineers. And what that means is that, yes, you get to use those chaps from a professional services engagement, but it means that when you do need us for support, for training ongoing, or even pre-sales scoping of solutions, we get to lean on the same basis of staff. That makes them better at installations because they know what kind of support issues you may have seen, but it means they're much better at support because they've been on site, they know how to build this kit, and quite often the person that's helped you install whatever technology you choose to work with us on could potentially be the person that answers the support call and has an intimate knowledge of your network already. We've built on that massively over the last 10 years, specifically to really push our vendor status. So in terms of all of the key technologies we work with, we hold the top tier of accreditation. So not only are we adding as much value as possible from a technical and support point of view, we're also in the best place possible from a commercial aspect, and that obviously helps hugely also. From the point of view of the spaces, I've mentioned them really briefly. Excuse me, I'm just realizing that I was on two laptops and scrolling through the presentation on the wrong one. So yes, that was the agenda for today, and the housekeeping. I've talked it through already. So yes, in terms of the spaces that we sit in and the areas we operate in, I've covered this at a really high level. But in terms of the technologies themselves, here is a representation of all the different aspects. I'm not going to spend time working through them all, but in terms of today, obviously, relevant areas, network security, content security, data security, and even to a degree access and authentication with the space that Zedscaler can operate in also. Pretty much relevant for some of the other aspects also, but in terms of what we're going to cover today, they are the main aspects. If there are any topics or areas listed in that space, I will not take up your time today, but we're always happy and very keen to have specific conversations with you about what is actually relevant to yourselves and what other areas of interest may interact with your SSL requirement. So please do feel free to bring that up or try and arrange something more specific. In terms of where we sit and what we offer, I've covered the in-house escalation to support. Hopefully, you know, a lot of the people on this webinar today are already customers of Bytes Security Partnerships and already have some direct experience of our services. But for example, many people don't use us for the strategy conversations, bring this in nice and early to benefit from the experience we have of hundreds of customers going through similar requirements, and all the different vendors that we work with that can attack a problem from different angles. So the main thing I would say is in that regard, if we can take anything away from, I guess, the overview of Bytes, is please do use us as much as possible. Our support is unlimited, and our willingness to be involved at an early stage and help strategically to minimize the workload that you guys have in terms of research and give you the benefit of everyone else's experience as our customers. Please do use this as much as you can. In terms of SSL inspection, I've been at Bytes for 10 years now, and just before I joined, I was doing a computer science degree, so I was really excited to come in and talk about all the theory I'd learned, 3 days encryption and why that was so special versus single days, and nobody was interested in that. I learned about SSL encryption and I knew what it meant. And again, 10 years ago, people weren't really too interested in that conversation. In reality, the conversation quite often centered around, at the time, it's only really banking traffic that uses HTTPS, and I don't really want to be looking at my staff's banking traffic, so that's a problem for later. So obviously over the last 10 years, and especially in the last few, that's changed dramatically, with SSL becoming such a large part of internet traffic at the moment. We're seeing a typical statistic of 60% of traffic being SSL encrypted at the moment. Obviously the slide you have in front of you demonstrates that hackers are getting on this bandwagon. They've realized that there's a lovely large hole to try and work through. It's a very simple and easy thing to work with now, and we're seeing up to 54% of new threats are using SSL encryption to avoid our security mechanisms. As a business, obviously our conversations around all the technologies that customers already have has been centered around, do you need SSL decryption on your security appliances? Which appliances are relevant, and which ones need to decrypt that traffic to investigate whether there's malware involved? And mainly, when you do turn on SSL, how much of a performance impact is there? How many DR appliances are going to be come into scope as well? And how many remote sites are going to need to be brought into the conversation also, so make sure that we don't just have a good level of protection in one area and not cover the others or cover any DR plans. So a lot of our conversations have been around scoping this, about understanding the impact in terms of the size of appliances and being realistic, the amount of cost that's been added in. And what we're finding is a lot of our customers are a bit hesitant to bite off the size of tin that they should be. A lot of plans around moving to VMware environments have been scuppered slightly in terms of the extra performance requirement needed for SSL not being too relevant, not being too what's the word, aligned to the way virtual environments can give you the performance you need. Excuse me, in terms of the actual processing power. So what we've done is we've gone out to market and we've looked at what's in our mind a different approach, a better approach, and we've landed with Zedscaler. So they're a purely cloud web-based company. Security as a service is their speciality, and they're not a small business. They have been around, and they have got, as you can see from this slide, more than 15 million users and 5,000 companies globally. Their speciality is coming from the fact that this was a purely cloud business, and it was born of this requirement. It wasn't one of our other solutions or some of the other solutions that have taken tin that they sold on the perimeter, sold on the network that we've been consuming for many a year, and putting that into a data center and calling it a security service. In terms of the technology itself, how it differentiates itself and how it addresses the SSL problem, this is a pretty good time for me to hand over to Will, who's a lot more technical than myself, and allow him to go through his slides. So what I will do very quickly is end my slide deck and pass over to Will. Hopefully this will go through rather shortly, but I'll give him a bit of time to hopefully take over and start sharing his screen.
Let's just see if that works. Fantastic. Right, hopefully everyone can see that. I'm going to get some confirmation. You can see that?
Yes, perfect.
Jolly good.
Yes, you are.
Thanks for the introduction. Hi, my name is Will Matthews. I'm a sales engineer, fancy word for pre-sales engineer for Zedscaler in the UK. I've spent the last 20 years helping customers do pretty much what most of you will have in place. I work for firewall vendors and IPS vendors and putting those kind of solutions in place. And I was around when they first announced SSL. So and even in those days, people were talking about the security issues associated with it. So it's great to be here. Yeah, thanks for taking the time out to talk to us. And I'm going to quickly run through the Zedscaler offering. I'm not going to spend too much time doing the sales pitch. And then what I might do is there's a little bit of a slide there for a demo, because sometimes, you know, when talking about SSL decryption, that kind of thing, it's actually a lot easier to show it than actually talk about it. So I've got to go up, it'll take 2 minutes, and we can have a look at the interface, and I'll try and show you how easy it is to set up SSL encryption. Briefly, who we are. We are a cloud-based security platform. What does that mean? Basically means that you forward your traffic to Zedscaler, be it from your local network, be it your remote users, be it your branch offices, that sort of thing. Forward it to us, and we check it for the usual security stack. So we provide URL filtering, pretty obviously. We also provide firewall controls, application controls, next-gen firewall controls, all built in. We also provide things like IPS, sandboxing, antivirus, DLP, and all that other sort of good stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of take you through our sort of core design goals, and give you an idea for what we were thinking, and then that dovetails nicely into the SSL issue as well. So if say you worked in a company that had unlimited budget, this is it's obviously a fantasy company, unless of course you probably Google or something like that, but it's a fantasy company. What would you do? Right now, most people have got what I've been selling you for the last 20 years. That's a couple of firewalls, most certainly, maybe a web proxy, most certainly, all appliance-based, all stuff on your network. Maybe you've got a bit of IPS, maybe that's integrated with your firewall. Maybe you've got a DLP solution. Maybe you've got all these boxes. You've stacked these boxes up in your data centers, and you've not just bought one. You've typically bought two, and you've sort of said, right, if that one fails, that one's going to take over. And that's been absolutely fantastic. As Blake was saying, the landscape sort of changed a bit, and it changed a little bit about 10 years ago, and this is where SSL started to become quite prolific, and the proliferation of SSL came along with apps, and applications like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, so on and so forth came into play. And what these were, there was a little bit of confusion. These weren't websites. These were full-blown applications, and you installed them on your desktop. And you could start sending email. You could start sending files. You could start having chat sessions and sharing videos and all this sort of great stuff. And the solution you had in place right then, or perhaps even right now, could cope with it to a degree. But the other thing that had happened, in addition to quote unquote the cloud expanding, the user base, your network, started to expand in a similar sort of way. You were no longer in charge of a flat line with a AD server on it, with a firewall sort of stuck in the middle and some desktop users. Your users started to be connected via ADSL connections, I nearly said modem connections, connected by mobile phone connections and this sort of thing, and they were absolutely everywhere. And it was at this point that it was fairly obvious that the traditional way of doing sort of siloed security, doing these sort of security stacks in data centers, wasn't necessarily going to be the right way, and that was for a variety of reasons. If you had unlimited budget, what would you build? So you would obviously have more than one firewall, but that firewall should be, in theory, accessible to everyone. And it doesn't matter whether in London or Bristol or Tokyo or San Francisco or anywhere. That firewall ideally would be available to everyone, and it wouldn't just be HA; it would be N+1. Resilient. So no matter what fell down, it carried on going, and you had the resilience built in there. So you'd also have your firewall, you'd have your URL filter in the same sort of fashion, you'd have your IPS in the same sort of fashion, and the antivirus and the sandboxing, any of that sort of stuff. In effectively the internet, you could house these in a data center, and then what you would do is forward all your traffic, regardless of where the people were, to these data centers that you've got centrally hosted in the cloud. And that would be great, but then you couldn't just have this data center in London, right? You'd have to have this data center also in France. You'd have to have it in, I don't know, Turkey. You'd also have to have it in China and Japan and America, because your users are absolutely everywhere. And what they don't want to do is backhaul traffic back through the internet, back to your core data center in London. They want to get local access wherever they are. The other thing that you're going to be worried about is the performance side of things. How much, and quite pertinent obviously, is the SSL side of stuff, but how much, what happens if I switch on these boxes? What if I switch this tick box in the GUI? How much of a performance impact does it make? And this is one of the big sticking points. Whenever anyone looks at any of these appliances, regardless of whether it's a URL filter or whether it's a firewall or IPS or anything like that, the first question they generally ask is, what's the throughput? What's the performance? So if you're in your fantasy data center and you're building your fantasy security rig, not only have you got to dot it all around the world, you've got to make sure there's a throughput there to make sure it's always there, always on, always available, and not going to slow down because you've made the decision to switch on a particular feature or something like that. So, okay, you've now got this data center, you've packed it full of millions of pounds worth of Palo Altos and checkpoints and Fortinets and all that sort of stuff, and blue coats and whatever else, and you've stacked it all up. It's N+1, it's absolutely fantastic. The next thing you're going to think to yourself is, oh, hold on, someone's got to manage this, right? So right now, with your couple of firewalls on your network, you've got to manage them, you've got to update them, you've got to power them, you've got to rack them, you've got to look after them, effectively blow the dust out of the fans every couple of years, that sort of stuff. What would be ideal is if you could sort of push all that responsibility away. So if you could push the responsibility away of managing all this equipment, push away the responsibility for racking it, powering it, having the space in the data center, finding the kettle leads when you need them. If you could take all the responsibility for that, wash it away and give it to somebody else, you're starting to arrive at what Zedscaler's essentially offering. We offer a enterprise level security platform that provides the functionality, and I'll say it very carefully, for outbound traffic, deliverable to anyone on Earth. We have 100 data centers globally, and they're all hosted at tier 1 service providers. Basically, you forward your traffic to us, we pass it through our equipment, and then we allow you to create policies and manage it and manage the users and do the integration side of stuff without any of the heartache that's associated with that. So that brings us on to SSL a little bit. So one of the challenges with SSL has always been, what am I supposed to do with it? Now, if you go and talk to a firewall vendor or you go and talk to a URL filtering vendor, conversations get very, very tricky. They might sell you a 1 gig firewall, a firewall capable of having 1 gig of traffic, traversing it, but as soon as you say, well, actually I want to SSL decrypt that, things get a little bit more smoke and mirrors. Not to say that performance in general, throughput performance in general on appliances is smoke and mirrors anyway. They produce these figures, they're generally high watermarks. But the moment you start talking about SSL decryption, the conversation changes quite dramatically. And that's because it's a very confusing sort of set of metrics. I think it's a very confusing, you have to make assumptions. The figures they produce are based on assumptions. And, well, how much traffic have we got? What sort of traffic is it? What's the mix of traffic? How many users? How many sessions? How many connections in the connection table? All this sort of stuff starts to get very complicated. And that puts people off using SSL decryption, probably one of the biggest reasons. So in my experience of selling appliances, and this is the last time I sold a hardware appliance was 3 years ago now, this was one of the areas where people were obviously concerned but didn't really know how to address it. What's more troubling is that when you go onto the web and you start looking around and you say, right, okay, I'm thinking about buying this particular appliance, what's its SSL throughput? You'll notice that the numbers sort of, on a good day, if they're selling you a gig box, it can do half a gig of SSL. Worst case, it's coming down to a third, maybe even a fifth of the throughput that's stated. So there are these issues. Like I say, what Zedscaler has done is we've built this security platform, global security platform, and within that security platform, we've built our own hardware appliances, our own custom-built hardware appliances that have this architecture where we can firewall, we can URL filter, we can do IPS protections, antivirus protections, all this DLP sort of stuff at wire speed. We guarantee in our service that you get 95 percentile of all traffic is transacted across us in less than 100 milliseconds. Quite often it's substantially less than that. So we built this database, N+1 and everything else. Traffic goes through it. But the figures also include SSL decryption. The punchline to this is that the SSL decryption is part of the standard spec. One of the things we did when we build our data centers is that we monitor the traffic. And if a single node, so these single appliances that were built that make up the individual data centers, goes above 23% utilization, we then start scheduling in or planning for upgrading those sessions. So that's the first thing. We take away all the issues associated with performance. We take away all the issues associated with throughput. And certainly, if you come to me and say, "Well, I need you to decrypt, I don't know, 200 gig or whatever of SSL traffic," you have to tell me in advance, but that's not a concern of yours anymore, that's a concern of ours, and our SLAs stay in place. So that's the Zedscaler pitch. The why we are now with the web and SSL decryption is sort of quite interesting. SSL decryption, or SSL, sorry, traffic has been sold as a security feature. And it's a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, people seem to assume that because their Facebook traffic is SSL encrypted, they're going to be more secure. It sort of beggars belief because obviously they're sat on their PC and they're putting private information on a public website. But certainly the vendors, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, them sort of guys, leapt on it and have sort of sold SSL as a way of securing the communication to Facebook, which in a way is kind of true, but the other side of the coin is it has allowed people like Google, people like Apple, people like Facebook to circumnavigate the firewalls too, circumnavigate the IPSs to URL filtering and all that sort of good stuff, and put into that channel things that perhaps people on the local network shouldn't be doing, or certainly things that you as an organization think people shouldn't be doing, like sharing files and whatever else. So in addition to providing privacy, SSL has opened up a conduit to allow all sorts of things that under normal circumstances you would never have allowed into the network: the email, the file sharing, the URL filtering and all that sort of stuff. You would never have allowed people to do this stuff. Because SSL there, because of the limitations with appliances, SSL has become very prolific, but it's also become a major security risk. So in addition to the traditional sort of, well, am I going to get a virus or a piece of malware through SSL? You also have the issue of controlling applications within SSL. And there are lots of reasons why you might want to. If you're a law firm, for example, let's consider the case of something like Google Translate. So Google Translate is fantastic. You put it in your web page or your document, and you say, right, I want to convert this to English to Spanish. You click the button and off it goes and gets it. That's fantastic. If you are a law firm, however, there are some very questionable, from your point of view, things within the terms and conditions of Google Translate that means that the document might not necessarily be yours all the time. So it's important not only to look at SSL as a way of providing privacy and providing security, but also providing a level of security for the business as well. So there's lots of things going on there. So half the web is now encrypted. That makes everyone safer. It makes people safer, but you can't sniff the traffic. But that's not massively always been the issue. Maybe with credit cards and that sort of stuff it has, but it's been that sort of false dawn of it's the be all and end all security, when in truth that it's not. It's making businesses in many respects a lot less secure, and that has driven the need for people to want to decrypt that kind of traffic going through it. EMEA traffic analysis. So this is the mix of traffic. I know the guys from Bytes mentioned that 54%. We have a slightly different figure, 60%. But there's an awful lot of SSL traffic going through. So if you're right now using a firewall appliance or an IPS appliance that's rated to do, I don't know, let's say a gig, pick a number, it's unlikely to be able to cope with this sort of throughput. The other issue that you've got on the back of this is, what about mobile users? So if you've got a guy on an ADSL line sat at home, how are you going to cope with this? He's sort of backhauling his traffic either through the internet back to your local service, or he's not doing it at all. The next thing that guy might do is actually connect to your local network and infect that, or download a dodgy Word document or something like that. So there's all sorts of security issues, but there's also this performance issue as well, and there's also this deployment issue. And these are all the things that Zedscaler have hoped to address or have addressed in our solution. So SSL is quite prolific now. I sometimes question its use and its overuse. There's a few websites I use out there as demonstrations when showing that we're decrypting traffic, but yeah, certainly it has become an issue, and it has become something people need to address, and they need to address it without the worries associated with it typically. SSL web exploits. So this is talking specifically about the number of attacks coming through SSL, and this is what we've seen from our own internal resources. I would say 95% of all Zedscaler customers, probably even a little bit higher, switch on now to SSL decryption, and that is simply because it's so much more straightforward and so far less worrying than it has been traditionally for organizations. So you can see that there's an awful lot of traffic going through. This slide's a little bit out of date, but I expect it's slightly more than that today. But yeah, 10,000 hits per month where web exploits are exploited. It's not just about downloading viruses either. So a lot of people do focus a little bit on malware and the virus side of things, and obviously if you're a hacker, kind of makes sense to utilize SSL one way or another to deliver a package. But also you can send vulnerabilities too. So if you if you've got an exploit that I don't know, attacks Chrome or attacks Safari or attacks Firefox, something like that, that can be delivered to SSL, which kind of neuters the IPS's ability to protect you. So there are a vast number of it, and we see that the vast majority of attacks now are coming through SSL, simply because, you know, it's an open door. Anything can get through, and everyone knows that. The hackers know that, Facebook know that, Twitter know that, and also banking people and everyone else knows that. SSL is an open door, and you can pretty much shove anything through it, and it's not inspected while it's in transit. So the SSL challenge, 99% of passwords are only seen 58 seconds. This is kind of an interesting stat. Malware's changed quite a lot. One of the things that we added to our product is sandboxing. Sandboxing is a very straightforward sort of technology that essentially takes a copy of any file that's been downloaded, detonates it in a virtualized system, looks at its behavior and goes, oh, look, that's bad. This stat is talking towards that. So this 99% of malware hashes are only seen for 58 seconds. Is sort of what it's saying is that malware changes fairly dramatically. And one of the things that's not mentioned here is the fact that you can no longer rely on desktop antivirus. It's been proven time and time again not very good. The industry has embraced sandboxing technologies wholly, and this is the reason for that. And if you are a malware writer and you're half sensible, then you know your malware that you've not necessarily written yourself, but you've hired or bought or rented or whatever else, is brand new. It's going to be antivirus proof, because obviously the people who write the malware test it for that first, and you're going to shove it through SSL. So viruses are new, they move very quickly, and the fact is that you're not necessarily going to see them on the endpoint. 50 of advanced threats hide behind SSL. This goes back to what I was saying about the IPS side of things. So intrusion prevention is what protects the client machines. So antivirus protects any files being downloaded, but the IPS, or the intrusion prevention system, is there to protect your browser from being exploited. So if someone clicks on a drive-by attack, or if someone clicks on a browser exploit, or a cross-site scripting, or some other vulnerability of that nature, a network-borne vulnerability, then if it's in SSL, it's not going to be seen. So you do need to also decrypt that traffic. And finally, as I've already said, inspecting all traffic can require 8 times more security appliances. This isn't even exaggerated. There was a shift in the internet in the TLS algorithm when it shifted from 1024 bytes to 2048 bytes. This literally halved the throughput of what devices could already do with SSL decryption. So inspecting all traffic requiring 8 more appliances, that's a bit vague. I would say it's probably even less than that. This is what Zedscaler set out to do. This was a design that we set out design goal that we set out to achieve. This was take away all the worries about this, switch on SSL decryption, inspect all traffic all the time, switch on all the features, switch on absolutely everything. Don't worry about maintaining it, managing it, updating it, supporting it, whatever else, and have that level of security irrespective of where people are in the world, effectively. So they're the SSL challenges. These are the 3 fears of SSL decryption. Performance I've already touched on. Privacy it comes from a different angle. When you're a corporation or an organization, the concern about privacy comes from a different angle. Blake already mentioned that, you know, companies don't like the idea of decrypting their employees' health data or their financial data, and that is something that certainly needs to be addressed. So that's, in fairness, it's highlighted red, and that's probably because that is the #1 fear of all organizations. Performance comes second. The third one is the complexity side of things. So the complexity side of things is, well, how do I do this? You know, SSL decryption is considered a little bit of a black art. I think if you've already played with it on regular appliances, you'll recognize that it has become fairly easy. I think Zedscaler, and we'll show in a demo next, has made it as straightforward as possible. But certainly these are the core 3 areas where people have most concerns when it comes through to SSL decryption. So hopefully I've touched on the performance side. It's not an issue. Privacy I'll show you in the demo, and the complexity I'll show you in the demo as well. So what I'll do is, I've been ranting on for 22 seconds. It's very weird. You know, when you do these WebExes, you're in a room alone, staring at a monitor. What I'll do is I'll switch to thing. I'm happy to take any questions if people have them. If the guys at Bytes could take a look if there's any questions. It's very quiet. It's very quiet. I'll quickly switch to the Zedscaler GUI. He said, brilliantly, I bet you it's logged me out. So let me just explode that for you. Let's see if I'm still logged in. So this is the Zedscaler interface. This is the dashboard. You can drill down on these various elements. You have security. So this has got some live traffic going through it, and you can see the various aspects. You can also see cloud applications. One of the interesting things about this demo is that the traffic that's running through here is actually a great big long list of vulnerabilities. So it's we've got a tool that goes out there, it scrapes the internet and it finds pieces of malware, it finds phishing sites, it finds malicious websites, viruses, all sorts of bad things, and it continually pulls it through. And what this sort of shows you is look at the amount of applications in there. So while you may agree that yeah, people need privacy when they're going on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all that sort of stuff, Vimeo, Salesforce, it is important to look inside of that traffic and say, you know what, perhaps we do need to see inside of there for the good of the company. You know, we're not necessarily interested in whether Bob's going to the I don't know, the beer festival in Cambridge this weekend. We are slightly more concerned that maybe if Bob's accidentally downloading a virus or his browser's accidentally, and this is quite telling. So this is quite telling. It's showing that, you know, despite the fact we're just scraping for vulnerabilities, we're seeing a lot of stuff pop up in here that's being considered known applications. Quick thing, we do have CASB integration as well, which is why it's popping up there all the time, so you can see the sky-high integration that we have in the CyberCloud integration. So let me quickly go on to the policy side of stuff. So this is a full-blown, this is everything that you would get if you subscribe to the Zedscaler service. What I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to go into the policy, and you can see in here, this is where we set up malware protection, sandboxing, browser control, URL filtering, so on and so forth. So this is all the good stuff that Zedscaler does as part of the course. This is what we provide as part of the course. And I'm going to click on the SSL inspection thing, and hopefully this will allay any fears around what the complexity side of things. So what you can see in here is the configuration screen, right? And I have all sorts of options in here. So I can block certain HTTPS to certain sites. I can put specific URLs in there. This notification thing here, what this notification thing does is, if it's been blocked, you get a pop up in your browser saying, oh, you've been blocked, which is kind of handy. People like that. The next part is controlling different types of traffic. So there are tools out there. I don't know whether you've ever seen them. They are kind of cool from a wrong point of view. So there are lots of evasion tools that use what you could consider bastardized versions of the SSL Cipher suite. That means that people like Palo Alto Networks, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Zedscaler can't decrypt them. So one of the things we provide is this ability to if we can't decrypt it, then we're going to block it. You never run into this issue, you know, obviously using Facebook and Twitter, and you want to decrypt those, they're always undecryptable. So it makes kind of good sense there. Next one down is the one that most people are interested in, right? So it's saying do not inspect sessions to these URL categories. So right there, I'm sort of saying don't SSL decrypt finance and health information. If I had a burning desire to add in another one, I don't know, gambling doesn't make an awful lot of sense, but for the sake of an example, I'm going to use it. I can put that in there, and then suddenly I'm not decrypting SSL. I can also specify specific hosts. So if you are managing a firewall remotely or some sort of other device, you can put in your own host there. You can also specify applications. Now I've got a couple in there. PayPal is one, Dropbox is the other. And this is a good point to mention quickly and set expectations on the side. A lot of people want to decrypt stuff like Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, all that sort of stuff. Those guys have an interesting technology called certificate pinning. What certificate pinning is basically is if you have the application installed on your machine, on your mobile phone, or on your Windows machine or your Mac or whatever, actually inside the Dropbox application, as an example, is the certificate itself. And if Dropbox doesn't see that certificate, Dropbox doesn't work. So when you're doing SSL decryption, you sometimes have to put exceptions in for certain types of application, and we have the ability to do that as well. Obviously, we can control other types of file sharing. So yes, if someone, one of the things that we notice a lot, I guess if I go back into the dashboard and look at cloud applications, you'll notice that there's things like Dropbox, there it is, towards the top there. If the file is shared via Dropbox via a web link, i.e. not via the application, then we can decrypt that stuff. So we can see inside the Dropbox applications, and this is Dropbox and the others, Google Drive and all that sort of stuff, have been favorites of hackers where they've hosted files on those sites, and then they send a link, and you click on the link, it opens up the Dropbox in the browser. We can actually look inside of those. What we can't do is look inside the applications. Ooh, that's gone wrong. Look inside the applications if the little app's installed on your machine there. So there we go. How do I handle untrusted certificates? Block untrusted certificates. It's hackers. I mean, hackers don't typically, if someone's doing a professional job, not some sort of amateurish spray and pray attack, typically host malware or vulnerabilities on known sites. But you will find the occasional one where they've sort of thrown up an Apache box, enabled SSL, and sort of made a self-signed certificate. Kind of makes sense to block unsigned certificates. You also get the ability to control revoke certificates, which is good. And how do I control traffic for mobile? How do I SSL decrypt for mobile traffic? You do it by switching that radio button on right there. So that's the privacy and the configuration side. That's pretty sort of straightforward. The next step is, or the next question people have is generally around certificates, and this is sometimes a sticking point. We do provide a certificate. You can download it, you can distribute it to your users, and then install it via something like GPO or SCCM. We also have the Zedscaler application, so if you want a little bit more control over using that sort of stuff, we can distribute a certificate using that, and that's fine, that works great. The other option you have as well is you can actually upload your own certificates. So if you have a PKI infrastructure already, you've got your own in-house certificate authority, and you have a trust relationship set up, you can actually import those to Zedscaler's cloud service as well, and we can use that when decrypting traffic, and therefore all the problems go away. So in a nutshell, that's the SSL setup. It's not difficult. Like I say, you don't have worries about performance. Performance is our problem. We're a service. And aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. There is one last thing I'll show you. So I've made a quick change to that. One of the great pains of deploying technologies, so it doesn't matter what vendor, what appliance-based vendor you have, is if you have multiple sites, multiple users dotted all around the globe, committing the policy or pushing a policy out to these devices can be problematic. With Zedscaler, that's almost a non-issue as well. So regardless, if I had 100 users hanging off the back of this solution, and they're all mobile and in China and Vietnam and goodness knows where else, by pressing that button, that policy is now active to everyone using the service within your organization, which is it's a minor thing. It's certainly a minor thing, but for me, that's quite exciting. Right, so that's it. That's a demo over and done with. I'm still happy to take any questions. I'll quickly go back to this, and we'll touch on it. We've done the demo. Zedscaler, like I say, is a cloud solution. We talk an awful lot about how to deploy things. We integrate very easily. As you can imagine, we are a cloud service. We protect your organization, regardless of how it's distributed, how it's deployed, where you use it, and everything else, from the internet. So it protects almost a cloud from a cloud. And because of that, the way of integrating with us is designed to be as straightforward as possible. So it doesn't matter whether you've got this sort of model here on the left, where you've got the traditional stack of security stuff, you want to integrate with cloud-based applications and the internet, we can facilitate that. We can also facilitate if you want to simplify things. So as a rule, we say, if you've got a checkpoint or you've got a Palo or a Fortinet or something like that on your network, we're not saying chuck it away. That's the first thing to sort of know. What we are saying is simplify your network. If you have a lot of remote sites, why are you shipping out a box? Why not give them a Zedscaler service and have them connect to that? We also talk about cloud enablement. So if an organization has a cloud first strategy, obviously we can help with that, and we can take away and leverage your plans when looking at things like SD-WAN and having local breakout points for internet access, regardless. So that's essentially us and it. I would encourage you to take a look at this. It's quite an interesting little test. You can click on that link, obviously not there, but if you type it into your web browser, it will give you an idea of the type of security. Don't just do it from your local network. If you've got a regular firewall sort of installed, you might do okay on this sort of test. But click it when you're in a Starbucks, click it when you're at home, click it when you're out and about, and see how that security preview works for us. It works for you. It's an interesting little exercise, and yeah, the results can be quite opening. It tests for a lot of things. So it does test for SSL decryption, but also tests for cross-site scripting and viruses and malware and application control and all that other good stuff. So with that, I know I've gone through that very quickly. I do ramble, I know that, and I do know that I'm staring at a monitor in a slightly darkened room. But if you have any questions at all, and I'll ask the guys from Bytes to hop back in again. He said.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, I'm just having fun with the handies and the mute side of things.
Hello. I think we have been abandoned. I guess there's experiencing some technical difficulties. I think we're going to close off the WebEx now unless they come back to us in the next few seconds. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Appreciate your time. It's not always easy to take an hour out of your work. With that, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to sit on mute and see if they come back. But any questions, feel free to contact us. I'm sure if you contact us via the emails that have been sent out, any questions will be responded to. Again, thanks for your time and do take care.